We are proud to have Remitly on board as our headline sponsors in April and May. When it comes to family, no matter where they are, they're always close to our hearts. Perhaps it's why millions of people trust Remitly to send money worldwide. It's easy to spend money quickly, safely, and affordably. And with Remitly's great exchange rates and low fees, more of the money you send reaches the people who matter most. Because at the end of the day, family is everything. Download the Remitly app today and enjoy a special offer on your first transfer. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. England have announced their first test squad of a potentially seismic 2025. Over in India, history has been made as a 14-year-old Vaibhav Suryavanshi hit an astonishing 35 ball 100 in the IPL, the second quickest in the tournament's history, while back in England, a pair of East Midlands counties are leading the way in the county championship. Also today, we get stuck into Tim Wigmore's new book on the history of Test cricket. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today are Tim Wigmore and Cameron Ponsonby. Mark Butcher will be joining us shortly. But before we go to Mark, a reminder that we've been really busy on the old Patreon. Something like 20 extra episodes are scheduled in May. So we do an additional weekly show every week, a county championship roundup show every week, and a daily episode on every day of England international cricket, men's and women's, every day when they're playing, which if you look at the schedule, happens a lot in May, happens a lot in June, happens in a lot in July. So if you want to get involved, head to the link in the description. Anyway, Mark Butcher on England's first test squad of the year. Butch, we have the first England test squad of 2025. No major surprises, no high-profile axing. Sam Cook gets his first test call-up. Josh Tongue is recalled, and Jordan Cox, who's initially called up for that New Zealand test squad at the end of 2024, is retained as a spare batter. What are your initial thoughts on the squad?
Yeah, not a massive amount of surprises, actually. Great that Sam Cook has finally got a call-up. I can stop fielding angry tweets from people saying, why isn't Cook in the England squad? And I'd said all along that kind of, the retirement of Jimmy Anderson may well usher in the time of Sam Cook. And perhaps for some it's come half a year too late, but it's come. His numbers against first division opposition are exceptional. I mean, probably 4 or 5 runs in terms of average less than the next best. That's 17 and a half or something, and he gets out the top 6 batters at an average of 16. So this is a guy who really knows what he's doing. Doesn't tick the all-out pace box, which is a nice show of flexibility from the selectors and from Stokes and McCullum in recognising just sheer new ball bowling skill. And I think given that England's other options with pace, I think that's a very handy thing to have in the side. You've got that variety of Tongue, who's been called up after what has been a brilliant start to the county championship season. Comfortably the quickest bloke knocking around in county cricket right now. And the sort of rawness of Gus Atkinson, despite what he did last year, to back that up again would be quite something if he was to do that 2 years on the trot. So to have a steady, metronomic, highly skilled new ball bowler in the ranks is a very, very good thing.
Remarkably, the most experienced at test level specialist bowler in this squad is Shoaib Bashir, with 15 tests to his name. In many ways, he's the most eye-catching retention. He's had a really, really difficult time of it since the end of the English summer last year, really. So 2 wickets at 152 for Glamorgan this time round, going at more than 4 runs and over. He doesn't make the Somerset side, and it's not even last week, at least, it didn't even merit a mention on the Somerset preview for the game that Bashir didn't make the side or make the squad. And he's 16 wickets at 71 in all cricket since the start of the New Zealand tour, which includes a 3-test series in New Zealand, an England Lions tour of Australia, and the start of the county championship this year. Numerically, he's clearly not the best English spinner available. Why do you think England have retained him?
Ask me another. Oh boy. I honestly, that is one of the sort of the real sort of standout picks, I think, because it's one thing I think to bring somebody into the side. When they brought him into the team with very, very little sort of first class experience, he came in and did wonderfully well. I think over a pretty long sample size now, pretty large sample size now, it's been proven that he has an enormous amount of work to do. So the bolter, who provided two fifers in Test match cricket last summer, has now really hit the skids. And again, it's a conversation that we have so often on the show about the lack of a lot of options when it comes to picking spin bowlers, and the two guys who are either have more Test match experience, as in Jack Leach, or who are arguably the better bowler out of the lot of them. Liam Dawson are not once again given a mention or given a shout. So look, I don't know, because this needs to be sorted out prior to India and prior to the Ashes, really. Either they have a hotline to something that Bashir is working on that is making it difficult for him to bowl with any sort of consistency for Glamorgan, or there's an enormous amount of blind faith being shown in the young man. I sincerely hope it's the first, but I probably feel that it's more likely to be the latter.
This squad isn't just a squad for the first test of the summer. They're going to have a elongated training camp before the test starts. So if you're throwing it ahead to the India series and Australia, history tells us England's teams tend to change a little bit when they play 10 games against the best two teams in the world. And I think it's quite interesting that they haven't blooded in someone who isn't in the team right now, but might come into the equation later on. I guess the exception to that is Jordan Cox, who is the spare batter in the squad. He has a brilliant record, by the way, since joining Essex at the start of last summer. Yeah. Averages 65 from 14 games. Are you surprised that there aren't more options that are new, if that makes sense? There's not another spinner, for example. There's not another new quick bowler. There are 4 seamers in this squad. 3 of them are going to play. I think most likely it's going to be Potts that's on the bench as well. So there's not a new seamer. And there's also, if there's a gap potentially coming down the line at the top of the order, there's not a spare top order bat. Jordan Cox tends to bat in the middle order or takes the gloves and bats even lower down.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jacob Bethel is the kind of the missing name there, and he's obviously otherwise engaged at the IPL, so he would be, that there's another spare batter there. But the lack of an extra spin bowler, the lack of another pace bowler is an interesting one, as you rightly call it. But I think there is also the fact that England will be, or the English players will be playing 4-day cricket whilst the Zimbabwe Test match is going on. That there are still many county fixtures before the first Test match against India. So I don't think that it's absolutely essential that they've named people in this first squad for now. I think it's equally as important that players are out there playing cricket, playing for their counties, getting overs under their belt, and doing all the stuff that was traditionally the norm for players in days gone by. So look, it's Bethel's the one that's missing, and that might, we haven't spoken about Zach Crawley keeping his place yet after averaging less than 10 in New Zealand and generally having a rough old time. He probably saved himself with a couple of timely half centuries just prior to the squad being announced. Although I say that he probably didn't save himself at all. He was probably going to get picked anyway. But when Bethel comes back into that lineup, then suddenly there's a conversation to be had around who potentially might not make the cut. And so there is your extra batter. But as far as the quick bowlers are concerned, as far as who's out there playing at the minute, I think they've got the right 4, and that there will be others waiting in the wings. And others that will come back from the IPL, etc., that might come into consideration come June.
Finally, on Crawley, this feels like this is it. This 11 test stretch against Zimbabwe, India, and Australia. This is the chance for him to really shut the doubters up, really. He's been given so much opportunity from England. I think I saw a stat recently, only 8 players in English test history have opened the batting more for England than Zach Crawley. As you say, he averaged under 10 in New Zealand. He average is about 25 from 4.5 county championship games so far this summer. This really is it for Crawley, isn't it?
I don't know. Is it?
Well, it must be, right? It must be, right?
It must be, yeah. But I think we've probably been through that before. So I don't know, honestly. You would think and you would hope that another, if you get through maybe 3-4 test matches of the summer, that the clamour and the realisation perhaps that, maybe he isn't the answer to England's opening batting position after all, will come down as clear as day on everybody. But that might not be the case. I think we have been here before. So, it's incumbent upon him to make runs, and incumbent upon the rest of us to try not to look surprised if he gets picked if he doesn't.
So what I mean by this being it for Crawley is more that I feel like we will know the answer one way or the other at the end of this stretch. Surely if these struggles continue, so bad were the struggles in New Zealand, it felt like if that was a 4-test tour, they might have taken him out the firing line, so extreme were his struggles against Matt Henry. If he continues that sort of form, it feels like he might not be that many test matches away from losing his spot.
Well, yeah, yes, but all of that is logic. A lot of the time he's been selected has defied logic, which is why I'm kind of smiling away at the thought that maybe we'll have a definitive answer on what the future of Zach Crawley holds. The only thing that I will say is that once the India and Australia Test series are over, should they not go particularly well either for individuals or for the team, then it might well be, a change of everything. In which case, perhaps normal rules go back to applying again, and people get picked upon performances that they've put in over periods of time, and selection goes back to a mode that is more recognisable from things in the past, and that's always been a possibility. No leadership group, no regime at the top lasts forever, and very few of them survive. Away Ashes series, particularly ones that don't go well. So if that is the case, then we might be having a completely new discussion. But we might have to wait until February until that happens.
Would you like to see the selection philosophy and criteria be a little bit more old school? I know they've done really well and picked some guys from nowhere who have done really well off not a lot of first-class cricket. But I'm sort of sensing from your answers around Bashir and Crawley, you if you were in charge, you might want it to be a slightly more old school way of going about things.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think they've shown, but I think they've shown some flexibility with that. I think that the picking of Sam Cooke gives you that idea that they are willing to kind of go against what have been mantras, the mantra for pace and all the rest of it. Cooke comes in, nobody's going to argue with that selection, and it completely sort of goes 180 degrees away from the selections of all other fast bowlers in most circumstances. So I don't think that they are that dogmatic that they won't go away from either players that they've preferred or styles of cricketers that they have preferred. I just think that there's been a blind spot with Crawley, unlike any other that I've ever seen. And the spinner one is still rather baffling. As the numbers are stark in the case of Bashir on the wrong side of selection, the numbers are stark for Dawson on the plus side of selection with bat and ball, and more importantly with ball. So there is some stubbornness there, but we've known that forever. So we'll just have to wait and see, and we'll have to wait and see, and we'll have to hope that the guys that they put their faith in perform, because it's not as though we sit here doing these podcasts hoping that they're terrible so that we can say I told you so. That's not the point of the game. But sometimes you are left scratching your head and thinking, well, what will it take for a change of tack on this particular individual?
I think just finally on Crawley, the thing that must give the selectors hope that he can turn things around is his excellent record against India and Australia in 2023 and 2024. He was England's most consistent batter over those 10 test matches, and at the end of that India series, it did look like, okay, this is a guy who by England's own admission in 2022, they thought he would never be a consistent opener, and that he'd proven them wrong over that 10-test stretch. So we've seen him do it before.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is what they will be hoping against. Hope happens again. I guess, and I don't have any skin in the game with this at all. But I suppose that the thing is that people are county members, people love English cricket, people who are playing English cricket who kind of think to themselves, goodness gracious, what would it take for X player or Y player to get as many opportunities and fail as many times as this guy but never get dropped? And that's where it's a pub argument, isn't it? That's where it comes from. And the only way you put a stop to it is by making runs, making an unanswerable case for yourself, or at least not stinking the place out. I think that's the thing that people are looking for. I think if everybody can sort of understand and cope with, a guy averaging sort of 34 and playing a couple of good knocks, getting knocked over with a couple of good deliveries. It's just the sort of like the endless torrent of the same dismissal over and over again for not very many, without any sort of seeming consequence to that kind of gets people's backs up. And there is the essence of Crawley, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, it's actually 3 weeks until that first test match starts, so a very, very long build-up. But cheers for your time. Catch you next week.
My pleasure.
Ready for cricket action in one of the world's most beautiful settings. Follow England as they take on Ireland in the T20I series in Malahide. With Gullivers Sports Travel, you get match tickets, hand-picked hotels, flights, transfers, exclusive events, and more. Don't miss out. Book your ultimate cricket experience now at Gullivers Sports Travel. Before we move back to all things England and the English game, let's start with that extraordinary innings out in India from Vaibhav Suryavanshi. In just his third IPL game, he hit a 35 ball 100, the second quickest in IPL history, the quickest from an Indian player, 11 sixes and 7 fours in his 38 ball stay at the crease. Cam, have you seen anything remotely like it, or an achievement remotely like it, something so obviously extraordinary from someone so young?
Well, no, because all the records are being broken at once. I had it on mute as I was working at home, and I saw he brought his up his 100. I went, that's the kid, that's the child who's just done that. And then they flicked up the stat where it was the fastest hundreds in history, and it was second to Chris Gale. And you go, oh, right, so he's done something. He's done a double world record break, basically. He's been the youngest person to ever do it, and he's also been the second fastest. How good is this kid? And to pour cold water on it immediately with the player he reminds me of, I think Liam Livingstone.
Sorry?
Yeah,
that's a take I haven't heard before.
That is not what I thought you were going to say.
I know. I was trying to work out because he basically has the bat swing. Maybe I'm one of the only people who saw Liam Livingstone's century in the West Indies, so now I think he's the best player in the world.
The YouTube comments, man. The YouTube comments.
No, it's not in terms of his style of play. It's his bat swing. Liam Livingstone has this really long, all the way 360-degree bat swing, which Suryavanshi has as well. And it just reminds me of when people have the talent to actually hit the ball, rather than it being a case of making contact and making pretty or effective contact. His bat swing is full and all the way through. I hope that saves it a little bit in terms of the style, as it were. I'm not saying they're similar players. Please don't think I am saying that, even though it's what I did say. But I've just found it entirely remarkable from top to bottom. And the idea that the year will be 2045 and he'll be like Joe Root's age. And he's still got another 5 years to go.
He's got 3 more than 19 World Cups if he wants to. Although he doesn't, because India actually have a rule. They don't pick players for more than one under 19 World Cup. So I think he's probably outgrown that level already.
I heard more comparisons around the backswing to Lara, which I think is...
Well, I've always thought Livingston and Lara are very similar.
You've always thought your own backswing is similar to Lara's as well.
It was a properly good attack as well. Mohammad Siraj, Prasid Krishna, Ishant Sharma, Rashid Khan, Washington Sundar. It was totally extraordinary. I guess, Tim, the question is, I loved it. I had a great time watching it. I was moved. I was also slightly concerned in thinking, is this what cricket is going to be? Because it was total 100% intent, and
there were some edges.
There were some edges, which there are in every 100. But I was not worried, but part of me did think, is this what T20 cricket is going to be, where people are basically swinging every ball. And there's obviously immense skill in the fact that he's been able to swing it successfully so often in those 38 balls. But do you think that is basically what the game is going to be?
So you sort of saw him and you were like, he's completed cricket, and you didn't like that feeling?
Genuinely a little bit.
No, I think we always have this thing where generally in ICC events, you get the pitchers often do more. You have full strength attacks, and be it in 20 overs or 50 overs, you generally see scores become lower, and teams have to adapt, players have to adapt. IPL obviously is a really, really high standard of bowling. It's not like the bowlers are being rested, but you always see that thing in tournaments where scores tend to get a little bit lower, and so I don't think you'll be able to play like that all the time. But clearly, the trend in T20 cricket is to go hard. I think the impact rule has been so interesting because yes, it's increased scores, but actually a lot of kind of what we would have thought of as kind of old school anchor players, actually it's liberated them so much, and they've gone from striking at 120 to maybe like 140, like even like a Ajinkya Rahane for example. And it's like, so that does suggest there's levels there. But bowlers throughout history have always found a way. They've been written off a lot of times before. I've ever written this book in the 1930s. It was a terrible time to be a bowler. I'm not gonna miss a plug. Yeah.
You were making some faces whilst I was saying that.
Well, I think it speaks in part to the kind of high variance of T20 cricket. So he's played 5 first-class matches and averages 10. And that's not to say he's not an incredibly talented cricketer. But I got a message from a friend of mine who's not really a cricket fan. And he went, "I've lost respect for cricket." And I went, what do you mean? And he's like, "I don't respect anything where a child can be the best in the world at it." And he was basically like, "I need people to get older and I put time into their skill." And I think that kind of reflected where this innings, for it to be like the complete cricketer and for it to be like the rubber stamp of like he's genuinely not just incredibly talented, but the kind of full batting product. You want that in all forms of the game. Is that too harsh? I don't know if I've been like too picky there.
I think you also want a sense of kind of like narrative build up in terms of like with test players when they get all these struggles and then they kind of maybe they're 28 or 30 and then they've kind of unlocked something. It was a kind of a perfect storm. And it's, if you play in a very, very risky way, you scored 100, which is amazing, but you could flip that and be like, he's gone for 35 balls, which actually put it that way, it's not that many balls to come off at, and he's done, it's been incredible. Well, so
the skill is extraordinary because so many players are batting with a similar intent and they're not doing that or doing anything anywhere nearly as good as that. So I think, it's an amazing effort. The other part of it is that when T20 cricket first came in, people initially described it, it's going to be a young man's game. It's not really what we're seeing, actually. It's actually older.
Old blokes win things.
Exactly. Old blokes win things. You look at the other end of the scale in the IPL. Faf du Plessis is still one of the more consistent overseas batters. And actually, if you look at English cricket, people burst onto the scene in their early 20s and don't necessarily nail spots. Will Smead, Tom Banton, etc. down at Somerset both thought when they came through, these guys are going to be playing loads of IPL cricket very soon. Didn't quite happen with either of them. I'm sure it will do down the line. So it is totally unprecedented. I just wanted to say something about his age because some people have been a bit snooty and dismissive about his age, essentially dismissing the innings because they don't think he is actually 14. And there is an interview doing the rounds from a couple of years ago where he refers to an upcoming birthday that suggests that he is more likely 15 now. And I think fixating over his age is almost irrelevant because it is a totally astonishing achievement for any age.
If David Warner plays innings, it would be incredible.
And he is clearly ridiculously young, whatever. Okay, he might be 15, which is still ridiculous. And I think that needs to be said.
But of course, with Shahid Afridi, when he got his 37-ball century in ODI, he was 16 then, and it was like, and everyone's like, no way, you must be 4 or 5 years older. And then it's like, but then he's still playing T20 cricket for Pakistan when he's like 41. But that's, and we're not believing his age. That means he was 45. So
I've always thought that with Afridi, but whatever he was, he played for ages. So he was either really young or really old.
His age couldn't have been wrong in both directions.
Anyway, moving on. Cards on the table. We're recording this bit of the show before the England squad is announced. So this part of the episode may require a last-minute drastic edit. But anyway, John preemptively asked, how should England approach selection for the Zimbabwe test? On the one hand, it's a good opportunity to give experience to or have a look at uncapped players, or should it be used as a warm-up for the India series and just play your first choice 11? Cam, what do you reckon?
I'll pick who you want to play against India, in my opinion, because if you don't do that and you pick people who you're kind of giving an opportunity to, they then have a very strong opportunity to go, well, you've got to pick me in the following match. So, for example, to give an example, if it was a case that of England wants Bethel at 3 over Pope, I wouldn't then give Pope the test match against Zimbabwe because he might get 200, and then you have to pick him against India, even if you don't want to. I don't know what the selectors are thinking, but you can overthink these things and try and be too cute and too clever. If you just pick the team that, if you imagined you're playing India the following week, that is the route to least problems.
But I think that the kind of complication there is with Bethel, because as far as we know, he's not released by Bangalore to play. And my sense is, even if Ollie Pope is dropped, I think England will still have him as their first reserve. And if he was dropped and then first reserve, he would kind of be batting at 3 anyway. So it's a weird one there. And I actually think England, the way their decision on who to play against India will not really be governed by this test match too much. So I think if they think we want Bethel at 3 and we're going to squeeze Ollie Pope out, I think if Pope gets 200, that doesn't actually change their mind, and they just see it as, oh, that just shows why Pope is our next best batsman or whatever. And I know that. Yeah, it complicates some process, but I just think this regime are less kind of going to be less bothered by that outside noise than pretty much most others in English history.
Question from Jeff on the Patreon. He said, interesting comments from Mark Wood yesterday on the Sky Sports Cricket podcast. Do you think various friends have fed back to players returning from the winter just how irked people had got with them and how badly some of their pronouncements had gone down? Mark Wood gave a really interesting interview with the Sky Cricket podcast yesterday where he said that he was really disappointed in the perception of the England team not working very hard, and he admitted that at times, without going into specifics, some players have probably not helped themselves in what they've said to the media. It's 3 or 4 months ago, but people were really annoyed at England over the winter, initially in parts of the Test winter, but then also how they fared against India in the white ball stuff and the Champions Trophy. What do you think about Jeff's question there about potentially that sentiment has potentially reached the players?
Yeah, I think this winter was the first time in the McCullum era when you could begin to say, England have kind of half lost some fans, which, given how bad England were before McCullum took over, is an odd thing to say. But I think, the comments were really kind of irking people, and and I think there was sometimes all the noises are so positive about the team, but England last year in Test, they won 9, they lost 8, which is like a decent record. It's not like world-beating records. I think it did. I think some of that has gone back to the players. I also thought I was in Pakistan for the Champions Trophy, and I think from the kind of social media point of view, in terms of what England were putting out, it felt like England were very ostentatious with, oh, look, we're working so hard at training again, in a way that actually suggests it. And that's also to say they were training because of the comments from Peterson and stuff before, but it was like they were projecting that they were training, and I think that projection was maybe in part because of the criticism. So it was an interesting dynamic there.
A vicious cycle. Cam, how do you see it?
I do remember really laughing, and we know the guys who do the England social media, and I'm friends with them, but I remember really laughing when I think they're in Pakistan for the Champions Trophy, and there were these criticisms that they weren't training hard enough. And then,
in India, yeah.
And they stuck a video out where the warm-up was... there is a rubber chicken. And you had to hit each other with the chicken. I was like, no, get in the net.
No, that's very funny.
I think it was... Bazball, or whatever you want to call it, is effectively a kind of glorified philosophical version of work hard, play hard, right? And so they get in the nets, they train really hard, and they do. That is like a fact of the matter. You stand next to Ben Stokes and it's intimidating. Like if he was in the bar, you'd go, you are massive. I know you don't think of cricketers as these like massive athletes when you compare it to rugby or whatever sport.
First thing I thought working in cricket, they're just massive.
They're all
cricket
big.
players are massive.
Joe Root's like 6'2".
Yeah.
Like James Anderson, you stand next to him, he just looks like a normal kind of skinny, athletically built man. And you stand there and you're like in unbelievable shape and way taller than I am.
Yeah.
They do work really hard, but then they do, because they also had this kind of mantra of trying to lift the pressure off the players. And so what's being said internally is like, enjoy it. Like, don't worry about it. Savor the moment, play well. That then was echoed out to the public. And that is kind of a jarring message if you are not winning all the time. So winning 9 out of 8.
9 and losing 8, yeah.
Sorry. Compare that to when McCullum took over, was literally 1 win in 17. That's a marked improvement. But if you are going to say, isn't this wonderful? We win half our games, that also means you like lose half of them. So the other half of the time, you don't seem that great. But I found it interesting that it did end up having such cut through, to use kind of political terms.
I think there's another strand, which is a very odd thing to say, but I felt at times in the winter, Liam Dawson became a cool celeb, which is a very odd statement to make. And I think the reason is because people looked at this guy who's had incredible record in county cricket and is clearly a fantastic, all-round cricketer, not just a left-arm spinner. And
careful what you say about Liam Dawson on this podcast.
and the point was, people were like fans were like, how is this guy not being picked? It's because his face doesn't fit, or he's not fashionable, or he's not exciting new toy, basically. And there was a kind of angle that England, the perception that England are always picking for this mythical date in the future, rather than kind of focus on winning your matches. And even actually in the Caribbean in November for Freddie gets ball white ball tour. But I remember I did an event with Marcus Trescothick, and I was sort of asked what I thought England should do, and I said, it feels like England should pick kind of more grown ups. They should pick James Vince or Tom Abel or someone to bat at 3. And people were coming to me afterwards. It was like, I'm glad someone said it. I'm like, this doesn't really matter, but
someone says it as it is. But I do think that's a really salient point where 18 months ago, if you were like a county cricket Norse, if you were the boring person at the back of the room, you were going like, they should be picking Cook and Dawson. And you're laughed out. You're like, you're a loser. They're not 6'7", bowling, ragging off these who never played first class cricket. And cut to now, with the biggest year of English cricket in recent memory ahead, it's like, we might go Cook and Dawson, actually. That could be the way forward. Like, they've got 400 first class wickets. Wow. Cook's got 300. How much Dawson got? I don't know.
Someone who has really, really impressed this season, and we're almost certain he'll be in the squad, is Josh Tongue. Fifer again this week for top of the table. He's sort of the forgotten man of English cricket in 2024, but he could be utterly, utterly vital in 2025.
So I got this one entirely wrong over the winter. I was in a car with some of my more established colleagues, and I went, Josh Tongue's never playing for England again. And they all laughed at me, and they're like, are you paying any attention at all? They're like, he is the one player where if you interview Rob Key or you hear Rob Key talk in public, he's the one player that they bring up proactively. They really liked him. They liked him 2 years ago. They liked him more. Yeah, exactly. Well, he played in the Ashes Test here at the Lords. And then he's come back, and again, to speak about players who have bulked up and how big these cricketers are. Vidushan Hantharajah from Cricinfo was up at Trent Bridge the other day and was saying, he was on the outfield interviewing him, and he was like, this guy's massive. He's really bulked out. And he bowled that spell, his first red ball game in however long, on the opening day of the season, took his 5-wicket haul. And he's almost the perfect England pick at the moment, in that he is the exciting, inexperienced from a first-class cricket perspective pick, where Rob Key's gone this guy, this is one where other people are missing. But also he's backing it up with numbers. It's kind of a bit like Jamie Smith-esque, where actually they had a foot in both camps. And it feels like it doesn't feel that insightful anymore to be like, Josh Tongue's going to play a lot of cricket this summer for England if he stays fit.
I think Tongue's brilliant. I think he's genuinely quick, but he's not a bowler who is good because he's quick, if that makes sense. He is good and quick, which he's maybe one of very few England bowlers who are currently fit who are in that bracket. And if you're looking at the county speed guns, he is the quickest bowler in the country at the moment. Those speed guns are not the same as the ones you see on Sky. But he is constantly bowling 85 plus, and no one else is doing that.
You told an anecdote the other day, which I found quite interesting, from an unnamed player, which basically went just went through loads of good seamers, and they went good, Tongue, different.
Yeah,
and that was
exactly.
It. Just it was a level above. It was a different feeling facing him, and he's bowling down at
New Road, and this would have been before Tongue played for England as well. He was telling the story. So that's just what he was then, and the perception is that he's come back fitter than ever, quicker than ever,
and keeps hitting people in the head.
And he's 27 now, so there's often a sense with fast bowlers, they kind of grow into their bodies, and hopefully he's at that stage now. We saw so many of the great Australian crickets now all had injuries early in their career and then become really robust, often when they're in their 30s.
Farhan Ahmed, the 17-year-old brother of Rehan, who only recently turned 17, by the way, continues to impress for knots. He took a fourfer in the same game and caught the eye by bowling very economically, defending one particularly short boundary. How outlandish is it, Tim, to suggest that he might be in an England test squad within the next 12 months? He's only one of a handful of English specialist spinners bowling in Division 1. He averages 26 in first-class cricket from a sample size that is no longer tiny. As big as it could be for someone his age is what I'd say. And I'm as interested in the economy rate as I am the average. He goes at less than 3 and over the games he's played. He's bowled a lot of overs.
Yeah, so I was talking to someone from England last summer, and they were basically saying he's up there with the most exciting 16-year-olds we've ever seen. The only kind of question mark is like he's just an orthodox off spinner, but is he? But which is A, there's a question there, and B, like, possibly the most valuable England, one of the most valuable England Test players of the century was Graham Swan, who was an orthodox off spinner and a really, really good one at that. I mean, everything we've seen from Farhan, it is the control and it's the maturity, and I think there's also a sense there is more with his batting as well to unlock, which is not to say he will be, like Rehan is a better batsman, but Farhan potentially could become a good 8 or 9, which clearly is, as a spinner for England, it's hard to be a 10/11, so that possibly will be important for him going forward. But obviously, Shoaib Bashir has gone very, very difficult period. I think Farhan is, going to be right in the mix. I think, England are not going to be shy about giving him a chance. You almost wonder if this Zimbabwe test had been after the India series rather than before. Was there a world there when he was even going to make his debut?
But the interesting thing, Cam, is he's almost, despite being another young spinner who might come from nowhere almost to get into the England team, he's very, very different to Bashir in that he's bowled a lot in the county championship, his numbers are good, and he's not gone viral yet. And he doesn't have the same raw attributes that obviously people got excited about with not just Bashir, but Hartley as well.
Well, this is kind of why I reacted the way I did when Tim said, he's a traditional off spinner, because when we think about like finger spin, you think about someone like Jadeja, who like walks up to the wicket and then just goes boop. And it's like, whoa, how's he done that? Like, Farhan Ahmed sprints in from miles and then he just bowls these offies and he lands it on the spot every single time. And I remember he bowled this ball in like a youth test, and I saw it, and he kind of got it to go like the other way. It was amazing. It all looked weird, and I was like, who is that? It turns out a lot of other people had been aware of who he was as well. It was Farhan Ahmed. But I think he's incredibly exciting. I am very conscious of, like, we literally just picked a 20-year-old spinner like 18 months ago, and the conversation now is like, people take time to develop. Spinners are at their best in their late 20s. And the answer to that might be let's pick a 17-year-old. Let's go younger. Let's double down and go all the way. But I think he's really fun. If he does have more batting to come, that's so exciting. And why wouldn't he? He's literally 17 years old.
Yeah.
But I'm all in on Farhan Ahmed breaking his brother's record for the youngest Test cricketer ever. I just think that'd be fun.
But all the way, the chat was always that he was better than Rehan. Even Rehan had said that.
Do you have a theory on whether or not younger siblings are better than older siblings?
In general, younger siblings are a lot better than
There's a cricketer who's played for England, and it's always said by these, like, basically a friend of mine who plays in the same league as this cricketer's cousin. He goes, he's even better than the England one. I'm like, no, he's not. I've seen him play on the TV. I don't know who the cousin is.
Yeah.
He plays amateur cricket.
Yeah. I always think that whenever an international sports person plays international sport and they have a younger sibling who's only ever once or twice at the very least picked up a bat or a ball, whatever, they're always described as, younger ones are more exciting.
They're even better.
Younger ones even better. Anyway, back at Notts, Hasib Hamid is in great form for them. 443 runs at 110 so far this season. And more generally, it's been a great start to the year for the people I describe as the Silverwood boys, players who were picked under Silverwood, never had a look in under McCullum. James Bracey, another one who's going really well at the moment. Cam, just quickly, finally, on Notts, top of the table. Do you think they can keep it up?
Well, yeah, it feels like it's all come together a bit. And it's very easy to forget, mainly because I did, that they stayed up only on the last day of the season last year. They had 2 wins in the entirety of the 2024 season. They've already got 2 wins out of 4 this season. They would have been 3 out of 4, but they basically were well ahead of the game against Warwickshire, I want to say, and it just smashed down with rain. So they should be kind of 3 out of 4. And it feels a little bit like, do you remember a couple of years ago, they kind of pinched all those lads from Worcestershire? It feels like they're now like,
really good,
bearing the fruits of that. And it's like people are just growing up a little bit. You've had Farhan Ahmed come out of school and go, I'll be really good for you guys as well. Hasib Hamid has grown that little bit older, a bit more mature, kind of knows his game a little bit. It just feels like they have got their base really solid, and they've also got their overseas recruitment like nailed on. They've got Ferguson O'Neill was like the perfect 28-day signing. They got him in the country to time it so he would kind of have all the 4 games. I think that's true, unless I misunderstood something. And he's only come for this period because they've got Mohamed Abbas coming later. Mohamed Abbas has hundreds of first-class wickets at 20. There's no real reason at the moment why you can't see it continuing to go the way it is.
Well, the only thing I'd say against Notts is that maybe they can do what Essex do and basically field the same bowlers all season, and that works.
Yeah, that's fair.
But they've lost. Stone's injured for ages. Pennington's injured. I'm not sure if Tung's going to play another game this season. O'Neill's gone. So even though they've got Abbas coming in, it's a lot of work for guys who haven't played that much this season. So Conor McCurr, who they signed from Surrey, Rob Lord, who's quite quick, new to first-class cricket, he's probably going to have to play quite a lot if they're going to sustain the title challenge. But yeah, their top 7 is stacked. So Duckett playing this week, they had to drop an England Lions player, Freddie McCann, to get Ben Duckett in the team. Carl Varane's been amazing as the other overseas player. So yeah, really, really good start to the season for them. Elsewhere in Division 1, Surrey got their first win of the season against Somerset, who were not going well. At one point, Somerset with 38 for 7 in their second innings. And then the game of the round in Div 1 was where Durham beat Worcestershire in a very, very low-scoring game at New Road. Durham had an almost entirely new attack for this game. Cody Youssef, an uncapped South African, is in for a short-term deal. And then Jake Ball and Jack Blatherwick on loan from Somerset and Lancs, respectively. What do we think about this? Short-term loans, when Durham have lots of injuries, but it wasn't as explicit as no one's fit. They named a 15-man squad with lots of Durham seamers, and then they had a twos game a few days later where 4 senior Durham seamers played, and some players weren't 100% injured. They was borderline injured, borderline rested. What do you think?
I mean, we complain that people don't take the game seriously enough. That's Durham taking it really, really seriously, giving everything they possibly can to give themselves the advantage. I just think you look at Durham and, fast bowlers for England, you can't say they don't produce enough for England. So I think probably fair enough. No real issues. I mean, the rules are the rules, and that's If we think the rules aren't right, then it's a case of changing the rules. But yeah, no real issues from me.
Do you dislike? Because I've been trying to work out if I have an opinion on it, and I don't know if I do, which isn't particularly helpful for the purposes of this.
No, so I don't think I have an opinion other than it's obviously suboptimal from an optics point of view, parachuting players in for such a short period of time. I also think the real reason for this is just how ridiculous the schedule is in the first 2 months of the season. Like, if you have 8 rounds of games in the first 2 months that are literally back to back, I know everyone gets a rest round in that, you can't expect seamers to play every week. And it weakens the competition if they do play, because then they're absolutely knackered by the end of it. They're not bowling at 100%. So I actually have a lot of respect for Durham for not putting their bowlers through it if they weren't 100%, and almost saying like, okay, if we're allowed to do this, let's do this, because the schedule is ridiculous. And I don't know, I'm sure Durham fans probably don't love that they've done this. I'm sure Durham and the county probably don't love that they've done this, but I like that they have, and it's worked.
Well, yeah, and also if you want to produce players for England, you're better served by picking them in a few games fewer a season and letting them be closer to full tilt, so their speed counts are higher and they're just more effective and stuff. I mean, it a little bit goes back to obviously the county schedule and the argument for starting with one day cricket in April as a way of kind of easing yourself into the season of, fast bowlers are bowling 10 overs a day rather than potentially, over 20. And that's just a gentler start kind of work, potentially would work better for everybody. And it is just, it's such a relentless schedule. And obviously we want the Championship, especially Division 1, to resemble Test cricket as much as possible. Well, we all talk about the exertions of playing, 3 Test matches being straight after each other is seen as an absolute hard limit. And then for county cricket, off you go, lads, 7 in a row.
Do you know when Potts made his debut in 2022, he sort of came from nowhere. He played 7 games before his Test debut, and England basically had 4 back-to-back Tests. Yeah. And obviously he was knackered at the end of it. The bloke played 11 games back-to-back.
And people were like, it's a disgrace. His speed card's gone down by a mile.
The only thing, either of you guys watch Only Fools and Horses?
I've seen clips.
A little, yeah.
So Durham's the emergency loan signings did remind me of an episode of Only Fools and Horses where Trigger, the character Trigger, gets an award for the council. So he's a sweeper for the council. and he gets an award for having the same broom for 25 years. And his mate says, "Oh, Trigger, how have you done it? Amazing. How do you manage to keep the same broom working for 25 years?" And he said, well, I changed the head 15 times and the handle 5 times. Is it the same broom? Is it the same broom? Is it the same Durham? Anyway, asking the big questions today. In Div 2, Leicestershire beat Gloucestershire by 2 wickets, chasing 140 odd, having been 42 for 5. Ian Holland, who's doing really, really well at Grace Road, with a first innings 50 and then 7 wickets in the game overall. Cam, Leicester haven't been in Division 1 since 2003. They're going very well at the moment. Can they sustain it?
Can I go back to the broom?
Yes.
Because it reminded me of something. I've heard that's like a famous philosophical thing. It's called the ship of Theseus. The Theseus' paradox, I'm up on Wikipedia now, is basically about the idea of like, if you replace every part of a ship and repairing it, does it remain the same ship, and when does it change? So there we go. I just wanted to get that out there. Leicestershire.
Yeah.
It's so obviously linked.
Leicestershire, I'm on board, man. For no real nuanced reason other than their top 3 is so fun now. Rishi Patel, Sol Budinger, Farhan Ahmed. So the reason they've kind of fallen upon this combination is Rishi Patel I think he injured his hand in the first round. So they bumped up Farhan Ahmed to the top. He went 70, then 100. They went, okay, Patel's back fit again. How do we do this? And they've gone, right, Farhan at 3. Rishi Patel's a very beautiful player who Leicester's old coach, Paul Nixon, I think like 3 or so years ago, said that if he wouldn't be surprised at all to see Patel on England's radar about this year or in a year to come. Like, he's really, really talented. Farhan Ahmed is the most aesthetic cricketer out there. If you go back and watch his highlights of his century against Lancashire, first ball of the innings against Saka Mahmood, he like plays this audacious back foot drive through cover and just stands there. And you're like, this is so good. And then Sol Budinger is an absolute cowboy, and I love him. He tries to hit every ball for 6. I've seen him a lot in the Metro Bank over the last couple of years, and he is kind of my hipster's choice of kind of favourite cricketer on the circuit because he is uber attacking. I might be doing him a disservice by describing him in such simplistic terms, but I love watching him bat. And just as a top 3, it's worthwhile. Like, get the stream on whenever they're playing. It'll be a good time.
Yeah, and they actually have quite a good squad. So in this game, they managed to rotate their seamers. So Ben, Mike, and Tom Scriven. So a couple of weeks ago, people were saying they have the most extraordinary batting depth, where they have a guy at 11 who averages 25 in first-class cricket. So those 2 bowling all-rounders didn't play this week. And Roman Walker, who won like a fifer against India in a warm-up game, I want to say 4 years ago. And Josh Hull, who we know, they both played. So they've obviously got a squad that they can rotate. And Hull got Cameron Green in this game as well. An early Ashes warning.
Ashes boost.
That's it for part 2. In part 3, we're going to try and cover the entire history of Test cricket. Tim, you've written another book, Test Cricket, A History. Get it up.
Get it up. This is your copy. It's been very well thumbed already. Yeah, a bit tattered around the edges.
It is an extraordinary piece of work, extraordinarily thorough. And I found it consistently fascinating to read, even bits around periods of the game where I actually thought I knew quite a lot. Still felt like I was learning quite a lot. First question, how the hell did you put this together?
Yeah, it was born in Sri Lanka in March 2020 when I had a cursed dinner with Simon Wilde. It was my only night. It remains my only ever night in Sri Lanka because we came back because of the COVID the next day. We didn't know at the time. And we were talking about his very good history of England, which he'd written a few years before. And I basically said someone should do this, but for global test cricket. And he was saying, "Oh, I can't be bothered." And I was like, "Oh, maybe I'll have a go." And he's like, "Yeah, good luck." And then 5 years later, here we are. It was a huge amount of research. Probably interviewed over 40 test cricket, over 40 players, and many of the greats of the game. People like Sachin Tendulkar, Pat Cummins, Michael Holding, Ian Chappell, who's I reckon is a good shout for knowing more about test cricket than anyone alive.
Really?
I reckon.
Wow.
So many great interviews, and looked at hundreds of books. But I've written it. It's very much it's a narrative history. So it's very much not a stats book. It's about stories, matches and characters, and trying to bring everything together and see how what happens in one affects things in the other. And it's gone kind of very deep on the matches and incidents that change things, and obviously ignored a lot along the way. But and try to get a sense of how it all comes together. So yeah, very, very nice to see it out.
Not just a lot of interviews, but you read a lot of books for it as well. You told me 300 books.
Yeah, in the bibliography. Not necessarily all from A to Z, but actually quite a lot of them from start to finish.
That is amazing. It really does come across that way in the book. The first few chapters charts, I suppose, Test cricket's birth and then growth. One thing I found interesting is how many early Test matches, if you go on Cricket Info, you go, oh, that's a Test match, weren't at the time and were relatively arbitrarily given Test status retrospectively. Is that right?
Yeah, so there's an Australian journalist in the 1890s who just kind of comes up with a list. It's not quite back of it. It's like, oh, I liked him, so if he played a match, it probably should be a Test match. Oh, I hated that player, so no, it's not a Test match. And then that becomes a list, but it's as late as 1948 when they're still giving Test status back on to previous matches. So Australia, New Zealand in 1946, at the time, there's a kind of a row about whether that counts as a Test match or not. So it's like, and then people talk about the sanctity of statistics. It's very, very odd. I mean, you have like in English Test, some will just be low, like the Ashes cricket at the time, and was 3 days in England and timeless in Australia. But then if the series was still decided, then timeless for England for the final Test. So it's like, we're always comparing apples with oranges. So when people are like, we need different stats for day-night tests or whatever, it's like, well, look at this history. It's very strange. And South Africa, especially, a lot of South Africa matches in their early period do not, late 19th century, do not deserve Test status based on anything. Basically, England send sort of a C or D team and that they don't want to beat them by too much. So they deliberately, and England, another kind of very English thing is England have an approach where, unless it's to Australia, they deliberately, they send nothing like their full strength team. And it's a classic but like Australian cricket now, because it's like if you lose in the Caribbean, but you didn't send a couple of your best players, it doesn't really count.
I've seen that happen a couple of times.
So it's a bit. So actually, when England lose to West Indies in 1950, even though they'd lost to West Indies as before, like, oh my, this is like it's like such a huge deal.
Yeah, in the presence of the two Caribbean specialists here.
Yeah, I know.
One aspect that I suppose was new to me was the feeling that cricket missed an extraordinary opportunity to expand the game very early on. So I hadn't quite appreciated that cricket was actually quite big in the US, in Canada, and Argentina. And there was an opportunity, if you're comparing how big cricket was in those countries to where cricket started or Test cricket started, and particularly in a country like South Africa, given Test cricket, not at the start, but relatively early on, that cricket didn't want to include these guys.
No, so yeah, we could have all been having, if we talk about Caribbean special, we could have been Argentina specialists.
Away.
Yeah. Buenos Aires, yeah. Can you do it on a rainy Tuesday night in Buenos Aires? Yeah, so it's quite sad. So basically, one of the key figures who we haven't really heard of is Abe Bailey, who's a kind of Anglo-South African mining magnate. And he really wants to do everything he can to further links between South Africa and Australia and England. And he's the guy who launches the ICC in 1909. But the first word of that is imperial. And the whole idea of, so you have to be part of that, basically the empire to be able to be part of that, which excludes Argentina already, and it excludes America as well. So it's set up to be exclusionary, really, and that is a great sliding doors moment, because at that time, USA and Argentina were possibly probably both in the top 5 countries in the world, and then so you could have had a whole different sport being created. But cricket, Test cricket, for so much of its history, so intimately tied to empire and exclusion, basically. So it's very sad, and it's what's really frustrating is people are always like, oh, it's such a sort of strange sport. It would never have taken off in these countries, but it actually did have opportunities there. And one of the great nuggets is Clem Gibson, who was a kind of Anglo-Argentine. He's the only person to have been called up for an Ashes tour while in Buenos Aires, 1924-5, but he turns it down to focus on his businesses in Argentina.
When you say like cricket was big in the US and Argentina, what does that look like in comparison to if we're saying it was big in England? Like, was it just an established domestic sport?
So in Philadelphia, they had a really, really vibrant culture. I think in Philadelphia, cricket is more popular than baseball really at the time. It's weird because it's very concentrated there. And before the Civil War, actually, it was bigger than baseball. Abraham Lincoln went to a cricket match once, which was
I'm hearing this, yeah.
So Barty King around 1900. Many people think he's the best bowler in the world. So he's from Philadelphia. He can swing the ball, seam the ball, do everything, and he kind of imports some techniques from baseball. And their record, well, against sometimes they play kind of Australian teams or whatever, or when they come here, it's a very competitive record. So again, probably compared to South Africa, could have, were at that same sort of standard. Argentina, the dynamics were a little bit different because you have a lot of kind of Anglo Argentinians who are involved in industry, the railways in particular there. But you look at there is that in Spanish language newspapers in Argentina, they do have cricket schools and cricket reports. So there is something, and there are other people playing from those backgrounds as well. So there is something there. But if you tell people we don't want you to play, it turns out they will listen to you sometimes.
I hadn't realised how recent a lot of this stuff was. Another sliding doors moment was when India wins its independence. They have a decision to make about whether or not they remain in the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
And had they chosen not to be in the Commonwealth, this is as recently as 1950.
Yeah.
They would have had their test status retracted.
Yeah.
In 1950.
He makes that incredible decision. Although, of course, the funny thing is, the inconsistency, the hypocrisy really is that. So we talked about how it's Commonwealth countries to that point, but of course South Africa then are kicked out of the Commonwealth in 1960, which means by literally the ICC rules at the time, matches against them cannot be test matches. But England and Australia just like, we're going to ignore those rules and carry on playing test matches against them anyway. So I guess one of it's only a theme is that the rules are there to suit people when they want and then to be ignored when they're inconvenient.
When we were talking earlier, I said to you, I found this book a lot sadder than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be really interesting, and it is really interesting, but it is genuinely very sad, particularly the first 150 or so pages, because there is example after example of really quite grim discrimination everywhere in South Africa and the Caribbean against black people, in Australia against Indigenous Australians, in England against professionals who generally came from working class backgrounds. Similar story in India and Pakistan as well, against people who were not part of the aristocracy. It does feel like it's a bigger part of our sport than it is other sports. And I wonder, looking at the entire history of it, if those attitudes are more ingrained than we'd like to think, and that actually we haven't totally got rid of our exclusive attitude to who should be playing top level cricket. We are so protective over the number of countries who get funding, who are allowed to even play what we all say is the best format. I thought that was the most striking part of the book, almost.
Yeah, it was interesting. It's only intended as a kind of it's intended as a sort of a celebration of Test cricket, but no, it's a warts and all account, and that is part of the history. I mean, so really simple example. So England have this thing where their captain has to be an amateur. You have amateurs and professionals. So an amateur is someone who's unpaid, but often, of course, they get expenses that are worth more than salaries.
But also people who are rich enough to not be paid, basically.
But that's the point.
Yeah.
For people from a certain type of background. And so the MCC who run the England tours abroad, obviously there has to be an amateur as captain, and it was incredible looking back how bad the amateurs were. So over the first 10 tours the first 10 Ashes tours that the MCC run, which is from 1903 to 51, so that's 50 Test matches. So the kind of the overall average of everyone who captained England in those matches was 22 with the bat and 34 with the ball. No century there at all. So it's like, well, you're, and then there's all these grand theories of, why did we lose? The Australians just want it more. But if you start from the premise that your captain is on average not worth his place in the team, that's quite a bad place to start.
That is interesting. I mean, there was one story that I didn't know about Eddie Gilbert. So Bodyline is one of, nearly 100 years on, it's still one of cricket's most famous series, when essentially England decided to bang it in short to the Aussies at a level that no one had really done before. But the idea came from a guy called Eddie Gilbert, an Indigenous Australian fast bowler who rattled Bradman in a game in Australia, and word spread.
Yeah.
And his story is so sad.
Yeah, so it's great. So in 1931, he only 5 balls to Bradman, which Bradman describes as the fastest he's ever faced by a distance, which end with Bradman getting out to a bouncer. November 31, and England have seen Douglas John, to be fair, he saw when Brad, this is an incredible, bit of analysis. So Bradman at the Oval gets 230 in 1930, but he says afterwards, I spotted a weakness against the short ball, which is just incredible. I've got it, he's yellow, is the quote. It's like, well, he did get 230, man. A bit of when Australia were obsessed with picking left arm spinners against Kevin Peterson, and David Doherty gets him out for 227, so jumped on. But Gilbert then is one of the first to take his technique against Bradman to a different level, and because he's so fast, it has a huge effect. Bradman by this point is already the kind of the living legend that we all know of him. And that has a factor in England then deciding to use bodyline against Bradman. And the tragedy with Gilbert is he's never picked by Australia. He's treated really inhumanely. He's, as an Aboriginal person, he has to get permission to leave his state. He lives in a settlement and stuff. That he is one of quite a few Aboriginals who clearly had the talent to have played for Australia a long time before the first of Aboriginal descent was actually Jason Gillespie in 1996. And so that even before Gilbert, there'd been a few fast bowlers. Generally was fast bowlers. And it's also the classic thing of, umpires were seemingly more willing to noble Aboriginal players and stuff. So it's, a real tragedy.
When you're updating this and releasing volume 2 in 2055, what do you think you'll be adding to it?
Well, nice question. One of the things, so at the end, I do have a kind of survey the landscape now and look at what's ahead. I mean, this is not fashionable to say, but I do think the World Test Championship is really, really important for the future of Test cricket. So talking to people like Kane Williamson and Ross Taylor, there was a real sense that actually when New Zealand won that World Championship in 2021, that was like the best day in New Zealand's men's cricket history, full stop. And I was like, okay, that's an amazing thing. And you kind of need every country. South Africa obviously will be here in a month's time, but you need every country to have a chance to reach the pinnacle. You can't say the pinnacle's only open to you if you happen to be Australia, England, or India. So I think that is really important to make a World Test Championship that actually works. And to do that, of course, you need to sort out funding issues. I also think we need to have I just think the trade-off to me is quite simple, which is when New Zealand, say, play South Africa or Pakistan, whatever, what is better for Test cricket? Is it two matches of 5 days each, which probably finish on day 4? Or is it three tests of 4 days each? For me, three times 4 is way better. And actually writing this history, people go, what about statistics? Or what about those England tests that were limited to 3 days? Are that's fine. And actually we're seeing so few draws nowadays. So for me, if you had I think there's a world where you have, even within the existing flawed WTC model, if you had everyone plays, even with only 6 series each because of India-Pakistan issues, you could say, actually, you play 6 series each. Each is 3 matches. Each series is 3 matches or 4 days each. And actually, you know what? We're going to have a really complicated point system, which is you get 3 points if you win. You get 1 point if you draw. What is it? Crazy.
I don't get that.
Yeah. And then you have, obviously, Border Gavaskar Ashes, you can have those extra matches outside the structure. But I think actually having a structure that people understand is really, really important because...
It's a revolutionary idea.
Yeah. Because it'll never catch you up.
Can we go back to the kind of element of discrimination in cricket and whether it's unique to the sport? I think something that's quite unique to cricket, I was basically thinking when you guys were chatting, is you have a very split skill set and the impact that's had over the last 100, 200 years and in the present day. So if you go back in time, kind of amateurs were batters and professionals were bowlers, because it was like, I bat, you bowl. Basically, bowling machines didn't exist.
Yeah.
So like, you're the working class lads, you guys go and bowl, I want to have a bat all day. And that is reflected in the modern day where you look at England, you have a far greater percentage of batters come from are privately educated than bowlers. It's basically the idea of like the cricket's breakdown between nature and nurture is you have to be built to be able to bowl at 90 mile an hour, whereas you have to hit thousands of balls to be able to practice and become an elite batter. And it's reflected both from here to 100 years ago. So you think the fastest bowler Bradman ever faced was one of like 5 or 6 indigenous people to have ever played first class cricket for Queensland. So that was a whole entire population that didn't have access to the sport, but then would be the fastest bowler that, in theory, the greatest batter that's ever lived, ever faced. And you cut to now, if you think in the 21st century, who are the 2 fastest bowlers to have ever played for England? You go Tamal Mills, who first played cricket when he was 14, 15, when his mates just went, we're one short, do you want to come down? He went, I'm quite good at this. Then he had to learn how to bat and whatever. And Mark Wood, who's a northern working class lad who doesn't. And then you compare that to what's England's top three. Zach Crawley went to Tunbridge. Ben Duckett went to Stowe. If you want Jacob Bethel, he went to Rugby. Ollie Pope went to Cranley. Like, the fact that we're able to reel that off shows that in terms of whether that discrimination, that exclusivity of the sport still exists, it does. And you can look at South Africa as well. I think Temba Bavuma, although, yes, he's the test captain, I think he is, or at least was, the only black African batter to play for South Africa since apartheid.
He only one to score a century.
Only one to score a century, beg your
He
pardon.
still is that, yeah.
Whereas you compare that to bowling, and you've got Ntini, like Rabada, and Gidi. And so, yes, those kind of patterns do still exist, and something that I think, I'd love to be told if I'm wrong here, because I find it fascinating in other sports, somehow where the split skill sets plays into that and how that's had an impact over time.
Basically, being a bowler is too much like hard work for a lot of people.
Like, on your point, it just felt that so many points in cricket's history just lost out on so much talent. And if cricket is more exclusive, you don't find people who have the potential. If you use fast bowling as an example, you are just missing out on people who can bowl 90 miles per hour. And there's so many examples in the early days of Test cricket, in particular, of players who are objectively should be in a Test team but weren't picked because of their background or skin color.
I think writers, it's amazing how many Test teams have hampered themselves by not picking an actual strongest 11. It just happens again, and
The
it
game
is
next week's more
incredible.
important.
Yeah.
We're building for the Ashes.
Well, it's that, and it's a politics reason. But it's amazing. It's like West Indies is basically in their early to first 30 odd years, they want to have sort of 4 or 5 white players, and basically they have a lack of white bowlers. So they have to stack their batting with white batters, and I think. So until Frank Moore becomes the first black captain with tenure in 1960.
That's mental, by the way.
Yeah.
I remember learning that and I was like, what?
Which is absolutely mad.
Yeah.
But until then, white players in the top 6 had an average of 28, and everyone else in the top 6, 42. So it's like, okay, we're going to pick someone who averages 15 runs. It's just, it is crazy. And
The other, I guess the other reason why I found it a bit sad was just, I suppose, charting Test cricket's historic popularity. So on Worrell, that arguably the greatest ever series played, West Indies in Australia in
1960-61.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Sorry, it's things on the buzzers.
Yeah, you should just rock up a pub quiz, specialist
ruin
topic,
everything.
history of Test cricket.
The end of that Royal Series in Australia, West Indies in Melbourne, and let's be honest, Australians are probably a little bit more nice to West Indies because they won. If they've lost that, so there was some dodgy umpiring which goes in Australia's way. So if it's always easier to be gracious when you've won. But yeah, 250,000 people in Melbourne, they line the streets to say thanks to West Indies. So it's an incredible moment.
They didn't do that when Shamar Joseph took 7 for, did they? You say something?
No, I was just bemoaning that Shamar Joseph didn't get like a royal wave off goodbye.
The other,
But he gets on the last page here.
Oh, that's it. That was nice.
the real royal goodbye. The book also charts how the game has actually changed, like what techniques have changed over the years, how regulations have changed over the years, how bowlers have counteracted developments among batters. And there's just one. It was a throwaway paragraph, really, but one comparison I found quite interesting was a technical comparison between Don Bradman, good at batting, and Steve Smith, also good at batting. So you reference a guy called Tony Shillingshaw, a guy who you describe as having spent decades analysing Bradman's methods, and he argues that Steve Smith has shades of Bradman in his own game. So what are those shades? And if they exist, why isn't that page 1 of How to Bat?
So yeah, Tony is he was a minor counties player who became obsessed with batting. Literally spent 40, 50 years researching how he batted. But it is the kind of the way the bat it kind of picks up towards gully. It's not kind of over the stumps as tradition. It's towards gully, and it's also the sort of the shuffle in terms of both of these guys. I will not be out LBW because I will never miss the ball, and it opens up things. But there's an argument whether that is sort of a super skill that you can only access if you're so good at not missing the ball anyway.
Yeah.
But it is interesting in terms of I guess one of the abiding themes is there's so many different ways to be a great player, and there's not, and that's one of the beauties of Test cricket. But everyone has their different methods. But I think one of the takeaways again, I probably applies especially to England, is just be a bit more open-minded. There's probably a reason why if Lasith Malinga had come to English assistant, his under-13s coach would have said, like, don't you ever bowl like that ever again, or you are not coming back. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. It's a brilliant book. Couldn't recommend it anymore. Test cricketer history out now and available in all good.
It's not a good
bookshops.
bookshop, is the official criteria. It's not a good bookshop unless it's got it.
Okay,
yes.
but there must be some bad bookshops that already have it as well. So get it when you can. That is it for part 3. We'll be back for part 4 in a moment. For over 20 years, Total Play Limited have been helping organisations grow the game with the installation of ECB-approved non-turf pitches and practice facilities. We heard from the team bringing vision to reality. Something a bit different for the next bit of the show. We're joined by Anthony and Steve from Total Play. Great to have you on. First question, what is Total Play?
You're the guru, Anthony. You go ahead.
I wouldn't say that. The guru's not here, is he? But yeah, Total Play, sports surfacing specialists. We specialise in cricket, cricket surfacing, cricket nets, and facilitating cricket with non-turf surfaces. I'm Anthony. I'm responsible for the northern business. So the company's based in Northampton, quite close to the M1. So we're servicing the country up and down. I'm responsible for anything north of Northampton. And Steve, my colleague, who's here as well, is responsible for everything Northampton and south of Northampton. So we're the two business development managers for the company, front facing out there in the field, helping with clients taking these projects from concept through design to construction through to maintenance and aftercare.
Total Play's been around for a while now. What's the journey been like over the years?
Yeah, good. We're progressive. We're always sort of pushing, pushing forward and looking for new ways of doing things, better ways of doing things, more efficient ways of doing things. The company was originally set up, almost 20 years ago by our MD, David Bates, who he's been on the podcast before. He's got, a very in-depth background in cricket. Both Steve and I have backgrounds in cricket. It's progressive. These non-turf surfaces and the way things have been done in the industry are being done now much like they have for many, many, many years. So we're trying to push things forward.
You mentioned that you both have backgrounds in the game. What are your backgrounds in the game, and how does that inform what you guys do at Total Play?
Yeah, I'll go for it. I mean, I'm not anywhere near playing level and anywhere near Anthony's level. I'm, a very passionate clubby. My sort of educational background, a degree in sport, media and culture. And then, outside of that, from the cricket aspect, I've been involved for well over 20 years as a player, coach, umpire, various different sort of roles on committees, from sort of club welfare officer, captain of one of our teams at the moment. When you're talking to cricket people about these projects, you've got to have an understanding of the game. And I think hopefully, a lot of the time when we're out there, I can't speak for Anthony, but for myself, I like to think that passion shines through when we're talking to people. I've been with the company probably about 18 months now, and people keep asking me, it must be the ideal job for you, and absolutely spot on. It's my normal sort of turn of phrase is that I go around the south of the country, going to cricket grounds, talk to cricket people about cricket. You couldn't get a better sort of job for somebody who's so sort of passionate about the game.
Anthony, what's your background?
Steve's absolutely right. I think what he's trying to say is we are cricket badgers, and it's who we are. I've been a long time retired from playing cricket, but I've been with the company 11 years now, and doing exactly what Steve explained. Forward facing, talking to these great cricket people and clubs who are generally across the board great people. And when you've got that cricket background yourself, I think it's really, really helpful. to get across what's needed, and I think we're best placed to offer, the best advice, and it's coming from the best place. So yeah, I'm a long time retired from the game, but I did have a taste of a little bit of county cricket up here in my home county, Yorkshire, at the turn of the century. I suppose you'd have to say now, it's been a long time ago. I think coming from a cricket background, when I was playing my best cricket was very performance orientated. I can see what a cricketer needs from a surface and from a facility to best enable the best conditions for practice. So that's what I'm passionate about doing now.
It's more than a decent standard. The Yorkshire team at the turn of the century was a pretty decent outfit.
Yeah, it was. It was. And I felt privileged at the time to be able to be amongst those guys. I was a seam bowler, and I probably got my opportunity because so many of the Yorkshire lads were playing for the England team.
I'm a club cricketer as well, and my club might be in the market for getting some new nets in soon. If you're talking to a cricket club, what would you say is important when starting that process? Like, what are the sort of things that a cricket club should be considering, etc.?
From my point of view, it's quality, longevity. We do everything in house, so we're there to really help a client from start to finish in every way. And something that's going to perform, and whether we're working for the grassroots aspect of the game or the professional aspect of the game, we are putting these things in the same way, building things to the same standard, with the same techniques and understanding and detail. I've worked with clubs up in this region, up in Yorkshire, who I have really deep connected ties with. And I'm grateful that some of those clubs have come and asked me about this, and I'm seeing them now using the facilities that we've put in for them, and it's fantastic to see how it can really affect a club in a really positive way.
Sorry, Yas, I was just going to add off the back of that. Obviously, we come into the grounds and the clubs with a fresh set of eyes. Ultimately, the committee and the players and whatever at the club locally will know the ground better than we do, but sometimes you sort of have to take stock of what you've currently got, whether that's an old sort of dilapidated facility, be it a net block or a match pitch or whatever, and think, is it meeting our needs? Do we need more capacity, i.e. more net lanes, or like a longer non-turf pitch, for example? But then also think about all the other surrounding things like the positioning of it on the ground and that sort of thing. So obviously it's a bit of a mindset shift in cricket sometimes, is that it's always been there. It might be over the far side of the ground. You turn up on a drizzly sort of Tuesday evening and it's a bit grey and overcast, and people get to the car park and think, I can't be bothered to go over there. Where if the net facility is a bit closer to the car park, you're straight out the car, the kit's on your shoulder and you're straight in the nets, and you haven't really got an excuse then. So it's all about these sort of little local factors as well. Obviously we can impart that knowledge of the actual product itself, but how it fits into the ground sometimes is something else to consider.
How's the technology changing with non-turf solutions? How would nets change and look different now compared to say 20-25 years ago?
We are digging up some of these older facilities now and replacing them. It's clear that some of them haven't lasted as long as they should have, and that's the most disappointing thing about some parts of the industry, that things could be done better. The materials that are used, the approach to the construction, the method of construction, and with it, the warranties and expectations on performance longer term, things can be done better. So we've taken a lot of these points and we've acted on it. We're doing things better. The way the base is constructed, the qualities and depths of aggregates and geogrids and geomembranes and shot pads and carpets, it's all been pushed forward to provide a system or a facility that's going to perform over the longer period. And beyond that, beyond what's in the ground, and what can affect performance. It's also about what's above the ground. You know, the quality and the dimensions of the steelwork and the netting, the ball stop structure to make it safe, how that netting is hung, and with it, how long it's expected to last. So really, it's about offering something that's going to be in the ground, performing a lot longer with better materials for a better overall expectation on performance.
As an avid netter myself, the quality of a net makes me want to net more or less, if that makes sense. Like if the nets are solid externally from a structural point of view, and you know it's safer, you're more likely to want a net. But also if the surface is I suppose like trustworthy, like if you know it's a good surface, you're going to get so much more out of it. Like you don't really want to go and have a bat on a surface you don't really trust.
If you're practicing wrong, you're not going to be able to do it when you get out in the middle.
Exactly.
I think just tagging on for what Anthony's just said there as well is that, you know, one of our sort of key points is that we're putting these systems in to last. And so in a few years' time, you know, 10, 12, 15 years' time, you might need a new carpet on the top surface because it might be a bit tired, but we're not digging the whole thing out and starting again. You know, it's very similar to a well-built house. If you look after it well, it will look after you.
And then finally, it's not only non-turf solutions that Total Play specialise in. What exactly is in your cricket ground shop?
You've got all the peripheral ground equipment that a club needs in terms of flat sheet covers, mobile pitch covers, these systems to keep pitches dry to enable games to be played, batting cages. So, you know, a lot of peripheral ground equipment. And, we're sourcing this equipment and offering it out there as part of the overall offering from Total Play.
And how does it work practically? You know, if I wanted to get a batting cage for my club, how can I expect that to? What's the sort of time frame on that arriving, and how does something physically so big actually arrive?
Well, there's a couple of different ways of doing it. Either it can be palleted up and can be sent through to the club for them to self-install, or it can be done with installation. So, yeah, there's different options and so many different options on the products out there. Something to suit everybody and every client really. So yeah, just get in touch. It's not just the non-turf side of it and the facilities that we're dealing with. It's cricket ground products as well.
Yeah, loads of stuff that clubs can be interested in for sure. We'll leave a link to your website in the show notes if anyone's interested. I'm sure I'll be bringing you guys up at my club's next committee meeting. Anthony and Steve, thank you so much for your time. Great to have you and great to hear what you guys are all about.
Cheers, Yas.
Thank you. Thanks, Yas.
Elsewhere, this week, Sam Curran scored his highest ever IPL score, 88 in defeat for CSK on Wednesday. He's not really been in the team this year for CSK, and it's been a difficult winter for him, I suppose, at international level. Not really got a look in under McCullum since he took the reins. Is this where he should bat, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying for a few years, I think the future of Sam Curran, if there is one, in white ball cricket for England, is as basically a batting all-rounder who, in ODI terms can maybe bowl 6-ish overs, a 5/6 bowler, but almost a frontline batter. So he'd be looking to bat four or five really for England if he's going to play. I think he probably recognises that as well. He's done a lot of work, his power hitting. There's a lot there, but he remains a kind of curious player in that he's a kind of guy who you might think, oh, it's swinging, we're going to give him 3 or 4 overs with a new ball, but he's not going to bowl again. So it's a very odd kind of set of skill set, but there's still a lot to like about him as a cricketer. And of course, his leadership is really well regarded on the franchise circuit. So again, if McCullum wasn't coach, you'd probably say, given what he said about what he liked in bowlers, then you'd say Sam Curran would have been a pretty strong chance to have been captain. Who knows, that could still come again in the future because
he's still quite young.
He's still quite young, and the schedule is still quite insane.
Jimmy asks, good crew. Great way to start the question. Always nice to get some external voices on, and both of those guys are brilliant. What does Tim? He's only asked Tim this question, by the way.
Okay.
What does Tim make of the proposed IPL expansion? So this week, Aaron Dumal, the IPL's chairman, spoke to ESPN Cricinfo and suggested that the BCCI will have a look at having a full home and away IPL when the next media rights cycle starts in 2028, and that will expand the competition to 94 matches a year. I think it's currently in the mid 70s, 74. So what do you make of that? I suppose people say the IPL's expanded recently. It sort of has, but it also shrunk. So
yeah, exactly.
In the last 10, 15 years, it hasn't actually got any bigger. This is inevitable given the amount of money they make.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's been a, fairly open secret something like this was coming. I think a lot of people would, there's actually an argument that this could be a lot more ambitious in terms of 94 games for a league season is still very, you look across sports league around the world, it's still very, very small. I think the IPL's challenge is always going to be how can it expand as it wants while still retaining what's the best of it, which is the sense of this is a tournament. This is not like a league that goes on forever. And I guess the NFL is 4 months, so that's, in a way, I mean, actually, the NFL, they're pretty obsessed with the NFL and what they do there. So maybe that's a lesson that they've learned to not be too greedy. Because I suppose lots of people would be, is the dystopian world, well, as they would see it, where you have an 8-month IPL. So yeah, I see this as inevitable and coming, and I don't think it's actually incompatible with everything else. But that you'd hope that at some point there is a eventual agreement where this is the schedule. This is the proper window, because the IPL, it's been so strange. IPL has a de facto window, but it's never actually got an official window. So we've always had this slightly strange thing, which is why we have England playing a test match during the IPL, which is a pretty imperfect thing. But one of the interesting things about the IPL this year is actually the rise of domestic players. Like we're seeing more IPL teams. Quite a few have only named 2 in their 11, and an extra one as their impact. 2 overseas players. Yeah. So actually, I think what's basically happening is that the quality of Indian talent has improved so much. Also, the scouting of that talent has improved so much as well. But it feels like the league is in a way becoming less reliant on overseas players as well. So actually, if England players are saying in some cases we're not going to go, I think that's really not an issue for the IPL. Whereas when the IPL was started, if you'd had the top Aussies then all hadn't gone en masse, that was kind of more of an issue. So it's got to a stage where I think for Indian fans, like, they sort of want the very, very best overseas players. But if the choice is between a kind of slightly next level, if Will Jacks or someone, not to pick on him, but if between him and a 17-year-old Indian kid, all of them would rather watch the Indian teenager. And so maybe we'll see more teams going forward who don't use their full quota overseas.
I think because it follows the kind of Matt Roller's been working out there for Cricinfo, and PC did kind of preceding this one was that explaining why that the IPL hasn't grown that much, and basically that there's value. They find value in scarcity, and the idea that you want the IPL to be the soap opera, that rather than tuning into EastEnders in the evening, you're watching the one game that's on and you can follow the storyline. And so the idea that it moves to a full double round robin is probably, by that logic that they're presenting there, is as big as you'd want to go, to your point.
Yeah, and also they haven't expanded the number of teams. And I think 10 is, talking about the soap opera, 10 is the upper limit of where unless it's your actual literal job, you can just about keep on top of who plays for who and stuff. And if you expand any more beyond that, it becomes impossible. So that is the...
Would it potentially force the issue of creating windows, as it were? If the IPL gets that much bigger and you're like, right, we're now taking 3-4 months out, and we want your
think it would. Yeah, I think it would be. I think 94 game IPL. I think it's still 2.5, just under 3 months. So it's
3 months. Okay. Yeah. So say it's 3 months. It's a quarter of the year, and you go, we have this window, and it's like, right, the rest of the world has 9 months to work itself out. Whether I'm trying to work out if that's a potential silver lining of just creating some kind of clean cuts where.
Oh, no, I agree. I don't think, obviously, IPL expansion as 2 words put together scares a lot of people, but it's not that much of an expansion. Like it's only 20 more games, and it might happen in 3 years' time. So in terms of actual time, that's 3 weeks basically, if that. So that's not too bad. And I think the other thing that we missed in the discussion around Suryavanshi is where he's from.
Bihar,
So tell us more about.
Well, no, so he's from northeast India, which is Bihar is a very deprived part of India. It's with Bangladesh, kind of along that on the northeast corridor, and historically has produced very, very few players. And he's part of a much broader trend in Indian cricket, as documented. No, I'm joking.
No. That's genuinely why I brought it up. That is genuinely why I brought it up. But is it like
basically the big historical? One of the reasons, one of the amazing things is how bad India were for so long in Test cricket, and the reason for one of the big reasons for that transformation is they used to just get the bulk of their players from 5 or 6 different cities, and now they're actually scouting throughout the whole country. And you're seeing. I talked with the Rao Javdi said when I was growing up, the only eyes that mattered were your state selector. If he thought you're good or not, if he didn't think you were good, you were gone. He says now it's not only those. You have the IPL scouts. You have even like India have got their own kind of independent scouts out. You have the growth of private academies as well, who often will make money, but they also often sponsor kids as well. And so you have basically 4 pathways. You used to have only one. So basically the amount of talent that's being missed is far, far less. And of course, the amount of money has been transformed. Now you can make a really, really good living in India without even playing the IPL. Even a Ranji Trophy, a good Ranji Trophy player now, it's now really good living. So before you actually had a lot of very good Indian players who retire in their mid-20s, maybe if they weren't quite going to play for the national team because they weren't earning enough. Actually, one of the great stories, I think, I can do one more. India, I think, late 60s, they play against New Zealand and they beat New Zealand, and their reward is to be docked a 5th of their match fees. And the reason is because their match fees are like per rata on a daily basis, and so because they won in 4 days, they earn less than had they lost in 5.
Amazing. I guess the other thing around this is India's really big. India's really big. So
cricket is popular in India.
So that means they're going to get even better. And that if this is more than a one-off thing in India, that in the IPL rather, that they're less reliant on overseas players, well, that trend's only going one way.
Well, I was kind of trying to think. We always talk about 3/4 of total cricket money comes from India, but I was thinking in terms of total people who play cricket in the world, it probably is north of 2/3 from India. And I think we're still quite a way off saying 60, 70 of the best 100 cricketers in the world are from India. But that probably is a logical culmination of where we end up getting to. And if that happens, maybe you do only need 2 star overseas players per team. And actually, frankly, maybe they get to a point where actually if there's an England test match and England players on there, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, no, I agree. Just finally today, there was another Curran brother in action this week. Ben Curran was playing in Bangladesh. As Zimbabwe drew a test series there 1-1. Zimbabwe won the first test by 3 wickets. It's their 4th away win ever, which I was surprised by. They've only ever won 14 games and they've never beaten a non-Asian team. I just presume they would have beaten England or New Zealand in the 90s, but it didn't happen.
Barely been.
Well, I mean...
they were only in England 2000, 2003.
Yeah, and England wouldn't have had many tours to Zimbabwe. There was one in the 95,
96, 7, when the very...
I don't know why I'm even...
we flipping murdered them test when England drew with the scores level, and Bumble was coach afterwards, and he was not very impressed.
Handy Flower scored millions in games that he didn't win. And then Bangladesh leveled things up in the second game. Mehdi Hassan scored 100 and took a fifer and became the 26th player in Test history to take 200 wickets and score 2,000 runs. There was also 9 wickets in the game for Taijul Islam, and I wanted to finish the show on good old Taijul Islam. We don't give him a lot of time, but he's got 228 wickets at 31. He's going to end up with like 350 Test crickets, and no one talks about him. Not really anyone outside Bangladesh really knows what he looks like or have heard him speak. He's just quietly been really, really good at bowling left arm spin for about a decade.
Which is, of course, Bangladesh's great kind of contribution to Test. Yeah.
You're never coming back. Yeah. You're never coming back.
No, he fits with the tradition. Mohammed Rafiq, Shakib Al Hassan. It is nuts in Bangladesh. Everyone bowls left arm spin.
What chapter is that?
There's one Bangladesh last 40% of all Bangladesh's wickets in Test cricket are retaken by left arm spinners, which is just
that is, to be fair,
twice over anyone else's.
That is everything for today's show. Thanks so much for watching, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. Tim, Cam, pleasure to have you on. You can get the book, Test Cricket, A History, at all good bookshops and some bad ones as well.